a spider was able to completely distract all of what had been an hour and a half of immense focus. It's fascinating. Well, we've made it. Double digit time. Courtside podcast is now 10 episodes old. Who'd have thought we'd have got this far? Thank you so much for your company along the way. Over the past 10 episodes, we've been primarily speaking with coaches, looking at this constant refrain that's been spoken about journeying with our kids, journeying with players, that this whole conversation around process versus outcome, and how it's important for us to recognise, particularly from the sidelines, how we encourage the journey that our kids are on and stop demanding match after match that week they're always lifting the trophy, they're always scoring the winning goal, but maybe stepping back even further from the court side, from the pitch side, and seeing the person that our kids are becoming through the sport they love playing. And it's been a real pleasure speaking to so many exceptional coaches, and we thank them for their wisdom. Now that we're in double digits, we're going to change a little bit of tact. And we're going to start speaking to a whole lot of sports psychologists, really interested in the way that sport can enhance mental health, really interested in the way that sport can enhance mindfulness and spiritual and emotional well-being. But I'm also conscious that it can do the reverse, depending on how we as courtside and pitchside parents behave. So we're going to be really exploring this field of well-being, of mental health, and of emotional, spiritual and psychological development that sport can bring. Seized an opportunity last week down at the Barcelona Tennis Academy. There was a young sports psychologist who was with them for 2 weeks, and we heard about him because Elijah came home and said there's this a really cool mental guy, and we got the opportunity to speak to Conor Grant and just get to know him, what makes him tick as a sports psychologist, what got him into the work. But we're really impressed with the way he had spoken into and given really good tools to the players, and particularly our son, as he talked about them when he came home from club. This whole conversations around getting my head focused, being able to visualize, being mindful whilst I'm playing, being really present. How do I get those negative thoughts? How do I park them? How do I recognize they're there but don't allow them to dominate as I play? How do I get myself emotionally ready to play? And what do I do when things aren't going wrong? What techniques can I adopt to help me? This is a fascinating area for us to explore as parents, as we get emotionally involved in the sport that they're playing, let alone our kids. So the next few weeks we're going to be focusing, we're going to be focusing heavily around mental health and well-being. And we thought we'd kick it off with an opportune interview with Conor Grant, who's a sports psychologist from sportguru.me. It was a bit windy when we were chatting outside. The sun was baking down. It was gorgeous, but the wind kept on whisking across, so I do apologise if sometimes it gets a little bit noisy. But today's episode is a real cracker. So welcome to Courtside. Our guest today is Conor Grant. My name's Andy Burns, and this definitely is 10th Courtside Podcast.
He's Courtside Dad. He's Courtside Dad. He dreams of Wimbledon. He's Courtside Dad.
So welcome back to Courtside. I have with me Conor Grant. You can find out more about him at sportguru.me. He's a sport and exercise psychologist, or as Elijah said, who encountered him this week, Conor, the mental guy. So I didn't know whether that was quite, you were doing some extreme sports in front of him that you were mental, or whether it was just about psychology.
Yeah, I mean, I think with that one, Andy, I've been known to maybe do the odd windsurf, but certainly nothing too crazy. So mainly sports psychology. I hope.
That's good. So we're chatting today because you're over at the academy that we're connected to over here in Barcelona. But can you tell us your journey that literally brought you over to here to Barcelona? What's your journey in sport, and then why sports psychology?
Yeah, I mean, interesting one, I think. It started just a general sort of passion for sport. I've come up not a particularly sort of sporty family, but various sort of external family members who have really pushed it. So maybe national level, parents sort of supported, but it was my earliest passion, and it still has maintained. I mean, I guess jock of all trades would probably be the sort of description growing up. It was a lot of cricket, a lot of rugby. Tennis was probably the earliest passion, which I've sort of sustained. But yeah, an interest in sport led me to, I guess, sports science. That was the undergrad, and then the mental side, which was my undoing. I found most interesting at Chichester University, brilliant lecturer, and that's what I've sort of gone on to sort of forge an early-ish career in. So yeah.
So you commented that was your undoing, and as we've never met before, I might be opening a complete can of worms here.
Oh, there we go.
Share as much as you want. How in what way was it your undoing? Because we see a lot within sport. You know, you get even your top pros still wrestling. So much of sport is a mind game.
Yeah, it is, and I think you can't really sort of separate the mind from the body as well.
No.
I mean, I like to think it as a sort of continuous paradigm. I mean, they all work together. So for me, essentially, I guess anger and again looking for that perfect shot or that perfect long spin pass out wide or whatever it was, and I lost a lot of focus on what I should be doing out there. I'd get caught up by emotions, and I mean, and maybe not as external as other people, but I'd certainly beat myself up. Yeah.
And so that's kind of what got you interested in sports psychology, seeing others on a similar journey to yourself, and you're going, I can resonate with that.
Yeah. I mean, the bottom line is using that to help people, and I mean, I'm a people person, gregarious, and I mean, I want to look at athletes and say, well, actually, I can relate to this, and I feel like I have a few tools you can use, and that's that. Yeah.
So tell us a little bit about this lecturer at college who kind of, you said, got you and gripped you and said, this is a fascinating topic for me to explore.
He was brilliant. I mean, you have all sorts. I think at university you have your pracademics, so the sort of practical sports psychologists, and then those who are very much research based. And I think this guy sort of had a bit of both. He'd have a lot of assurance, and he'd watch me play uni rugby or whatever it was, and he'd have a subtle chat afterwards and say, "Con, well, maybe use these little skills." And he just had a lot of time for athletes, especially. I think he saw his eyes light up whenever he was chatting to anyone in the lecture room or whatever. So and he just that was his approach, which was amazing.
So what do you see as being kind of the roots of sports psychology? Is this a new bolt-on? Is this a new add-on? Is this a new part of sport we're seeing, or has it actually been around for longer than maybe we realise?
Yeah, I think it has. Actually, I think sort of. I mean, the guys that I've been referencing, Lazarus and Folkman, all these sort of old-aged principles of sports psychology. I think they were in the 70s, 80s, and even before that, I think there were lots of people. I mean, the pioneer. Lots of people think a guy called Ken Ravitza, and he did his best work, I think, 60s, 70s. So, I mean, the media and the way it's now portrayed, it's come through. Certainly, maybe since the turn of the millennium, people are starting to garner awareness, but no, it's been around a little while, but maybe just utilised more now.
Yeah, because we find it, I guess, you get the England squad many years ago, and Hoddle bringing external people, and that was years ago. Coble, I'm sure my age there, but even now with the Premier League clubs, or with, you get players like Djokovic and etc., they're very free and open to say, I've got a psychologist working with me. It does seem like a bit of, there's no stigma, or there is a lowering of the stigma of that.
Yeah, I think perceptions have changed. Certainly, I mean, everyone before might think, "Oh, I've got to fix this. I've got to cure this. We've got the shrink in here." And I'm quick to sort of say, well, actually, that's not the case. That's not what I've learned. I'm here as a performance enhancement. I'm an extra sort of tool if you can use that. And I think for the most part, I mean, there's a long way to go, Andy. There's still a lot of perceptions that need sort of breaking down, but I think people are more accepting to sports psychology now.
How does it work? Genuine interest piece here. How does it work if, like, you're here at the Academy in Barcelona these 2 weeks, you're working with a handful of players anyhow, and at some point some of those players might play against each other whilst you're here. How does that work? Because all of a sudden someone might go, I'm not going to open up to Connor because he might share my deepest, darkest secrets to the person I'm playing next to.
I mean, that's a jolly good question. Yeah, you don't want a conflict of interest. That can get you in a lot of trouble. I think I've given the group here a universal sort of set of tools or strategies to use, and it hasn't really gone to the deepest levels. I haven't had to break into any sheer counselling techniques here. It's more from the performance enhancement side. I've just been trying to look at the individual as a player, and if that comes up in a match against someone else I've been working with, then I'll spread my time evenly. But you're spot on. It can certainly become an interesting factor.
So for most of our listeners here, courtside parents, wanting the best for our kids as they're playing whichever sport it is, we're not coaches, we're not psychologists. At what point would you suggest, as a professional in this field, it might be something that we would consider as parents for our kids to think, they're getting to a certain age or a certain intensity in their sport. It's maybe moving from being an occasional hit about to this is getting a little bit serious. Is this an optional extra, or would you say this is something you probably really want to consider?
I think it can be beneficial at any age.
Yeah.
I mean, you've just got to be wary, especially as a practitioner, what you're putting across. Again, you don't want to delve too much into the darker secrets of psychology or clinical psych with a 12-year-old or even a bit older than that. I think, generally speaking, it would err more along the lines of sort of mental skills coaching, a little bit of concentration training for the youngsters. And then, I think to take it seriously, I think maybe 15, 16 and onwards, when they're starting to specialise in the sport. And I mean, I don't see a difference between getting a nutritionist on board really at that age and a sports psychologist. I feel like if it's the right connection and the right relationship, it can work. But you've got to be careful at a younger age for sure.
So you're talking about some of the concentration techniques. He says asking to clarify that, proving he wasn't concentrating. There you go. Maybe I need to see a psychologist. But what kind of tips or techniques have you been sharing with the guys here this week that might help?
Yeah, I like to keep it quite dynamic. Again, if you're relating to an adolescent, you're not going to go along the lines of the 8 steps Buddha enlightenment theories and bore them with I guess broad meditation. They're not going to relate to that. So it's been keeping it dynamic. So whether you can do a balancing task, I've got your son doing keeping a tennis ball on the finger and trying to maintain concentration, some obscure tasks, but with a good message behind each one. Again, you're trying to focus and you're trying to keep your mind on the present and seeing. And I've always asked them, how can you relate this to your tennis guys? And I've been amazed of the different responses, saying actually this is when I'm in a 20-shot rally and I've lost my attention to someone in the crowd or so and so. So any exercise I've come up with is meaningful, but it's supposed to be enjoyable as well.
So do you know through your connections with a whole lot of players any interesting techniques that you're aware people are using to kind of keep? I'm aware the whole towel rubbing thing, because I'm presuming tennis players don't sweat literally that much in between every single point. You
haven't seen me play that, I think. Okay, no, I think it's different. It's person specific. I've chatted a lot about pre-performance routines.
Yeah.
I mean, that in itself is an area within sports psychology. Following the same process before each point, calming the mind, and then resetting. I think that can be useful. I've come up with a few pre-performance routines for these kids, which has been brilliant. And then otherwise, I think mindfulness as a general sort of strategy in the background is really good. If you can do those exercises, it can only really help if it's done the right way.
Can you unpack a little bit about the mindfulness? Because I was going to ask you that later, but you brought it up now.
Yeah.
I'm really fascinated about this because it seems the new buzzword that's out there in a lot of areas.
Certainly.
But that kind of being mindful in the middle of the heat of the battle of the game.
Exactly. And I don't think it strays too far away from meditation.
Yeah.
I feel like that's its pillars. And I came onto it from acceptance commitment therapy.
Yeah.
So that in itself, I think it's a broad sort of clinical psych method, but it's certainly applied in sports psych. And using acceptance and commitment as part of how we can relate that to sports people.
What does that mean in the middle of a game, acceptance?
So again, it's like a player who potentially getting caught up by frustration or a distraction and not letting that really dictate your motor skills. So your next point, not letting it sort of affect your drop kick or your serve out wide. You're trying to really connect back into what's helpful, and through mindfulness training, that awareness of your emotions and giving yourself a distance between them and how they interfere with yourself. And that's the key there. I think being able to respond rather than react. I keep saying that with these guys, just be able to sort of soak it up and then act.
Yeah. I remember hearing Andy Murray get interviewed after winning Wimbledon for the first time. Obviously a little bit of pressure on the guy building up to it.
Only a little bit.
His own internal pressure. He wanted it, but also just one or two people in Great Britain were cheering him on. And that final serve that wins him the title he's dreamt of, and I think it was Sue Barker or someone kind of said, what were you thinking of when you did the serve? When I'd done that serve quite a few times before. It was just the same throw, it's the same toss, just keep doing what you've done for years. And there's me sitting there going, no, I'd be all over the place. There's obviously a learnt pattern there.
And I guess that's why they're the pros and we're
exactly.
No, I mean it's become, when it becomes a subconscious process, I think that's a level of mastery that Andy's probably got, maybe not even through mindfulness training, just through sheer repetition. I don't think he's a massive I don't think he's a massive advocate for it, but I'm sure he still does a lot of mindfulness. And just that ability to really keep it natural, and under sheer sort of external internal pressures, that's quite a task. So he's achieved that state in that instance.
Just need to get it to work on for some of our kids with their homework. So do you ever see I guess part of what I'm looking at for kind of sports like this is working with the players. But is there any tips and advice that you'd love to give back to us as parents? Because mentally and emotionally, we get caught up in the game sometimes more than our kids seem to do.
Yeah.
Or if it's on an equal par, they're handling it better than us.
Yes, yeah.
Any kind of observations or tips or help that you could give to us as parents?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like your son or daughter are going to be a reflection of yourself, especially when everything's on the line, isn't it? When it's all heated, I think they're gonna be looking at dad in the crowd, and if he's showing all these little negative emotions, it's only really, I think, going to have a detrimental effect, especially on a youngster.
Yeah.
So again, I mean, parents being mindful could be one, and I think understanding what the way their actions are speaking louder than words as a kid develops, and yeah, I think just using different strategies yourself, starting to understand your child and what's beneficial for them, maybe not letting ego take over. I mean, there's a lot out there in the research about sort of ego orientation and task orientation, so obviously if their child thinks that the dad or mum behaves with an ego or that sort of drive, then they think that might be the norm growing up, and then I think that will come through in their sport. So yeah, again, the process is banded around so much in sport, but really re-emphasizing that journey with your kids and making sure that you can facilitate that path rather than pushing it, I think.
So I guess from a parental side, we see our kids more than the coaches see them, but you guys see them in a different context, and very often they respond to you differently to the way us, because it's dad again. But seeing that Connor said it, I'll agree. Well, I think, Connor said exactly the same thing that I did, but because Connor said it, apparently it's now truth. So we have the joys of being a parent.
Yeah, but, I'm sure tricky.
But one of the things that I guess we will often journey with is knowing how good he can be and how good on certain bits he is, and then watching him sometimes not giving that 100%, and yet we always have off days. What is the balance there, particularly on looking at around psychology, of accepting the human dynamic of every person? You're not always going to be on top form every day, and some days I really can't be bothered, and us not wanting to be overbearing, but equally sometimes you do need that nudge and that come on. How do you manage that relationship?
I think the humanism aspect is huge. I think your passion can be construed in so many different ways. I mean, you guys are only going to know your kids better than the next person. You've been through the highs and lows. You know them inside out, and I think that comes through. I think the red mist might come when Paul, or whatever his name is, starts misbehaving, and your natural tendency is to react to that, because you know them, and you know that's maybe not them acting in the moment. But I think having faith in the situation you've put them in, so whether that's an academy, whether that's with their coaches, and then having faith in what they're trying to work on, I think being able to take that step back. I think it's Alistair McCaw, he's a very good sort of performance coach, has lots of great takeaways for parents and the like, and he's come up with I think it's almost like a 15-yard rule, so you've got to be away from the court or the pitch at that distance, so that you almost can't react. You've got no choice but to let them sort of find their own solutions on the court or the pitch, and I think that's quite useful. That could be a takeaway, I think, maybe for parents.
That's great. Yeah, I think we're becoming very conscious of having to take a few more steps this year back from the court, and then probably next year a couple more. And part of it is the thing that we've often talked about, is them needing to own the court that they're on without suddenly always glimpsing across to dad, what do I do? No, mate, this is you getting older. This is you working out, and I trust you enough to work it out.
Yeah, perfect. And that's going to come with training, isn't it? So they need to really reinforce what they're working on in training. I mean, that's why the coaches are there in those moments, so they can try and keep that mindset on themselves. I mean, easier said than done. I mean, when you're playing, especially in the heat out here in Spain, and there are distractions left, right, and centre. So, yeah, I think it's really trying to reinforce, maybe the technical side then, when it all goes a little bit sort of distracted, maybe.
We're going to Can we borrow a pinch any little techniques as we become kind of sports psychologist light parents?
Okay.
You're sat in the car just before the game, and they're getting, I don't know, maybe they're getting anxious. What do I do, Dad? What do I do, Mum? Are there any, instead of us just looking at them going, go on, my warrior, I'm proud of you, which is probably not going anywhere. No. Is there techniques we could do to help them? Yeah,
I think you can slow it down. I mean, I think humour actually can go a long way in those situations, making maybe light of the situation. I mean, easier said than done. But yeah, maybe getting them to sort of switch off. So whatever that is, maybe not purposely trying to distract away from the match or what's yet to come, but just trying to slow it down for them. Not really putting too much focus on the heated battle there. I think. Yeah, just trying to maybe ask your son or daughter, what do you want to get out of today? What's the attention here? And rather, aside from the outcome, what are you looking to improve, or what do you want to learn today, son or daughter? So that could be a technique, maybe.
Slow it down. As the parents there with their heart racing tend to a dozen.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, which is easier said than done.
So you do a lot of work around. You talk a lot around mentally tough. And so here, obviously, we're at the tennis. It could be at other sports. But what does mentally tough mean to you? Because this is something you talk about a lot.
Yeah, I think I had to practice this last year because I was working for a company called Mentally Tough Tennis. So that was the buzzword. Yeah, I think mental toughness and hardiness or resilience, they're pretty synonymous. It means, I guess being able to bounce back. Traits of mental toughness are when it's not going so well. I think when it's all sunshine and rainbows, it's an easy place. But I think the true test of an individual is what you're doing in the moments where it's not good. What are your thought patterns? Where's your motivation at? So I think mental toughness is essentially trying to really relate back to that present moment and how you can bounce back and how you can always look to improve. That would be my sort of vague definition. Sorry, it wasn't very specific. But
what do you mean by four patterns?
Sorry, thought patterns. Yeah, so thought patterns are where's your mindset in those moments. So when you're getting caught up.
Patterns. I thought you said four patterns.
No, sorry, no.
Patterns.
I do have a 4A thing, but it's a bit different. Yeah, okay. No, thought patterns. So what are your cognitions when it's all pretty heated and pressurized? That's important. That's what makes champions, I think. So
I guess that's you getting aware that when it's not going well, I often react like this. So I've got those kind of ways to counter it.
Yeah, and awareness is again one of my big sort of fundamentals with players. Awareness and acceptance. So again, can you be aware as quickly as possible when it's not going so well, and then turn that into something helpful? I think the quicker the better, really. Otherwise, I've spoken a lot here at the Academy about that snowball effect of are you aware at this moment, and if you aren't, then obviously it's going to keep coming back. Or if you try and fight those emotions, then they're more than likely to sort of show their head up again. So awareness and acceptance are huge, definitely.
So is acceptance you not trying to counter the fact that I feel like this when the shot goes wrong, but being aware that I do and knowing how to work with it instead of trying to deny it? Yeah,
I mean, I think the old age of sports psychology is the coping mechanisms, and in the heat of tennis, especially individual sport, one-on-one, I feel like that's nigh on impossible. So that ability to try and understand your emotions, if you're going to combat them, they will show their ugly head up again later on. So just accepting what they are, what the situation was, and then turning that into a helpful action for the next point. So it certainly helps you process into the next one.
Because our lodger came back and I said, what was Connor telling you about the other day? And he said, apparently I'm the aeroplane's captain and there are people who've paid to be on my aeroplane.
Yeah.
Explain.
Is that the only thing?
No, he said many, but I thought, right, he explained it to me, but I wonder whether you might be able to give me the factual response.
Yeah, it's no, thanks, Eddie. I mean, it's a pretty vague one, I guess, for those who are out of that bubble. But it's essentially taken from acceptance commitments, so ACT therapy again. And it's your journey, so you kind of picture a tennis match as a plane journey or a bus journey, and it's not all going to be plain sailing. So people are going to jump on your back. It could be external distractions. It could be mum and dad going hilarious on the sidelines. It could be your opponent playing well, the surface, whatever. And I think you've really got to sort of understand that in tennis that emotions are going to come up, and that's the idea of people coming on the bus or the plane, and they're allowed to be there. They've paid their money. Bear with me here, it's a weird one.
Yeah, that's good. I'm following you.
And I think that ability to kind of thank those passengers rather than battle with them again is going to help you in the long run. Maybe in the short run, if you tell those guys to bugger off, it might make you feel good. But later on down the line, I feel like if you can accept and you can thank those guys, then you can keep your mind technical and tactical. So that's the idea of thanking the passengers. I think that's if that makes any sense.
No, I'm with you on that, because I've had previous conversations with coaches and stuff, trying to talk with the players about being grateful sometimes when they're beaten.
Yes.
Instead of just being furious at it. Yeah, you can be upset that you lost. It's not the high point of your day.
Yeah.
But there is an ability, and you let's look at the male side of tennis. Apologies there, but just look at the male side. Are the big four as big as they are because the big four all frustrated each other in the sense of he keeps pegging me back, I've got to raise my game. He keeps pegging me back, I've got to. And so is Nadal at that peak? Is Murray at that peak? Would they not have been at that peak if the others hadn't have existed at that time? And instead of being frustrated that I might have won more Grand Slams, the celebration of but I became this player.
Okay.
Because you guys existed. Is that kind of?
Yes. Yeah. I mean, I think you're alluding to again that motivational climate.
Yeah.
So the atmosphere from which we can develop and we can sort of earn each other on. I mean, I'm gonna relocate back to. I was in Ghana last year, and there were. I mean, a slightly different example, but there were a group of under 18 boys, and they had very, very little. I think they'd come from certainly a sort of background of poverty, and tennis was their everything. That was their nucleus for development, and I think that peer pressure. I mean, it's a different example certainly with the big four, but how you can really each other on in a positive way. And I think, without any real coaching, those guys displayed such amazing talent, and I feel like a huge part of that was that sort of competitive anxiety, sort of mentality and atmosphere they had.
I mean, I was amazed at the US Open final, the women's final. I don't want to talk about Serena. I was really amazed at Naomi Osaka. I have a bias. I'm a fan. I think she's great.
Yeah.
She's fun. She's a fab to watch. Yeah. But in the midst of, not only is it your first Grand Slam, you are playing your absolute idol.
Yeah.
Someone who she keeps saying she shakes whenever she's near. She idolizes that much. And in the middle of all of the drama of simply playing the match and everything that went on around it, somehow she found, I don't know, some kind of happy place to enable her to push through. That is phenomenal.
I have to say I took my hat off to her. I think she's an amazing competitor, and it's interesting how people are sort of going to the mother there actually. So I think they're looking at that, maybe that sort of Japanese culture of keeping calm and looking things sort of objectively. I think for her that came through. She seems unbelievably calm in the heat of battle there, and I think she has a really, really quiet confidence which you can admire. You can hear it in her interviews. You can see it on the court, and that comes through. I mean, I heard her saying, "Oh, what are you going to say to Serena after this match?" It's like, "Oh, I love you, Serena," or something, some crazy response. And I was like, "Well, surely she's intimidated by this girl. She can't beat her." But and then the way she performed, I thought, well, she's really put that to the back of her mind. She's playing any other match, and I think that kind of mentality, having focus on your strengths and her weapons, she displayed amazing composure.
She did, and it was just phenomenal. I mean, I dine out on this regularly. I won the father's three-legged, not three-legged. I lost that one. I don't want to talk about that one. But the egg and spoon race last year at Largest School, and I can still genuinely, I had slight anxiety at the beginning because I thought I should win this. Yeah, it's the only time I've won anything, but we won't go into that.
No, I don't believe that for a second. I've heard of a few achievements here and there. Hey?
Well, yeah, I've got my 25 metres swimming certificate. But there is an individual in the heat of it all. Yeah. And she's able to compose it. Now that's where you can be impressed with a phenomenal forehand or a backhand or a drop kick. Johnny Wilkinson winning the World Cup in the rugby. Wow, just that last second, the composure to do the skill to do it, but yet there's also the composure to put the ball over the bar. There's the composure when all of the entire crowd, because it's a US crowd, of course they're going to be partisan. Yeah. But this is still me. You see in Djokovic, the gritty determination. We talk so much about the flair of the shot, but sometimes you just watch it and you go, I'm marvelling at that competitor, how composed you are.
Yeah, I mean, even the fact that you've touched upon, I guess, Wilkinson and Djokovic there, they have similarities in terms of their mental training actually. So they are amazingly, have showed composure traits across their careers. And I know Johnny obviously went into the Buddhism aspect, and that helped him. And I think they haven't been afraid to look outside of traditional sort of you've got to hit, if you hit these many balls you're going to be a champion. And I think they've looked at the mental side in a really expert level, and they've tried to sort of use maybe that mindfulness training or whatever's worked with them, and that's come through in those big moments, against Australia and in the final of US Open. So I think that's probably a testament to what they're doing in the background as well.
There was just a question listeners will get used to me always asking this question, but something I'm particularly interested in is if you were Elijah's mental guy, as he calls me now, the mental guy for the next 5-10 years, however long.
Yeah, okay.
How would people know that you've been investing in him, speaking in him, giving him those confidence? How would people know through the way he carried himself or played that obviously you were in his part of his development?
Yeah, that's the trickiest area in sports psychology. It's not tangible, you know. And I give a lot of people, well, it's not tangible in the short term. Let me put it that way. So I use the analogy of the swan on the water. So the swan obviously can get some serious speed across the water, but no one really sees what's going on underneath. You know, the peddlers are going like fury. So I guess it's that training in the background. You'll notice maybe a few months down the line that concentration might have improved and body language, and I feel like you may see it from the way he approaches people in everyday conversation. I think a big part for me is looking at the human aspects, so looking at the person behind the player and trying to improve, you know, their day-to-day interactions or their growth mindset. So I think you can see it, but in the short term, it's very tough to say, oh no, they're working with a sports psychologist, because their traits could be from effective parenting, could be from effective coaching, and it is tricky. Yeah, sports psych, it is tough to see where it's there. So.
Do you think we've lost a little bit of the human dynamic in some parts of sport? We've become too focused on the winning.
I think so.
It's quite odd to say, but
no. I think you're spot on. I think there's such an influence on or sort of focus on that outcome, isn't it? So. You know, the targets and always achieving targets, and we lose sight of the person who's actually out there fighting. You know, I think that is a factor for sure. Yeah.
So last bit. Just draw this bit to a close. Just for us as courtside parents, is there any kind of one or two tips of advice you'd like to give us from your observations as someone who's played, as someone who now works on the mental side of things? What couple of tips would you give us as courtsiders to help our kids flourish in the sport they love? Yeah,
I think you've got to align, you know, your values as a parent, and you've really got to, you know, be in touch with your child's sort of aspirations and emotions in terms of choosing their path. Or as I say, facilitating the path. You know, I think that's the most amazing thing I've seen is just parents who've rather than sort of put everything in boxes, they've allowed their child to have a bit of autonomy over that process, and they've rather sort of support is the main one there. So supporting an atmosphere of growth rather than, you know, putting it in place for them. I think that's when they can sort of self-learn and work on their emotional intelligence. I think that's important. So really aligning the school with the values, or the coaching with the values. You've got to try and make sure that you're all buying into the same thing, and that it's positive and helpful. Definitely.
I said that was the last question, but I lied.
No, good. All good.
You know, we've got a lot of parents who'll be listening who's the first port of call, their son or daughter will be thinking, I want to be the athlete.
Yes.
But sport offers vocational opportunities broader than simply just being the athlete.
Yeah.
What would you say are the real perks, the advantages of going into the line of work that you have, and it's still within the context that you thoroughly love, which is the sport? Yeah.
I think that was tricky. I mean, when I was doing my sports science undergrad, I was playing sport, you know, every day for hours. I was in the gym every day, and then I was learning about it again, and I think that got pretty overwhelming. But I think in terms of the positives, I mean, there's a lot you can learn about it yourself, and you can use your own self-help strategies. But certainly the vocational side, like, I mean, sport opens up so many pathways, and it's interesting. So many people are now hiring and getting motivational speakers into big corporate businesses with people who've been in the trenches in sport, because they've used those tools under pressure, and it can be applied to so many aspects of life. So you know, sport is such an amazing gateway, and as obviously for Elijah as well, it's just that confidence booster. You know, that's his area, and I was reinforcing that earlier with one of the players, that this is your opportunity to really flourish, and this is your moment where there really shouldn't be judgment. It's just you in that moment, and I think that's pretty special. You can't really find that in too many parts of life. I think sports pretty powerful there.
I agree with you on that, and I think that is a fantastic place for us. Let's not lose sight of that moment where our kids are flourishing and fully being alive. Conor, mate, thank you so much for joining us on this really cold day in Barcelona. It's been an absolute pleasure, and I look forward to the rest of the input you're going to put into our little man's life over the next few days.
Perfect. Yeah, thanks so much, Andy, and to all the listeners today as well. I hope this was helpful in some way. So yeah, thank you very much.
Cheers. Thanks. Bye.
He dreams of Wimbledon, he's courtside dad.
So welcome to the Courtside reflection with Kath and I. So Kath, I imagine you appreciated today's podcast, particularly as it reflects a lot of the work that you do in secondary schools.
Yeah, definitely. And I think there was lots of really useful phrases that came out in that today. Stop laughing at me. What was making me just chuckle then was Elijah's just played a match this afternoon, and unfortunately lost in the tie break. But just that phrase that stood out for me from Connor's talk was around respond rather than react. And there was something really intentional in that word of responding as opposed to reacting. So for me, as I hear that word respond, it's like you have a choice in that situation about how you react. And just with Elijah saying that in the last couple of points, randomly this spider flew in across the court. I'm not quite sure where it came from. I've never seen anything quite like it. But anyway, talk about a distraction for him. And it was 5-5 in the tiebreak. Yeah. And so this is I think it's called a super tiebreak or a king's tiebreak. So it is kind of first to 10. And then it was 5-5. And randomly this spider in the middle of a court was hanging in front of it. I do not know where this web was attached to. I know. And then, and in that moment, he reacted. He hates spiders anyway. But you could just see him glancing, watching this spider running across the court, which was quite a big spider, to be fair. Yeah. But it was just such a funny thing because he certainly did not choose the right response. And afterwards, we talked to him about this spider, and we were like, why did you not just kill it? No offense to people who love animals out there, but why did you not just move it or do something? But yeah, just that strange reaction that he had to that, and actually that made a real difference.
Because he'd been fully focused in the whole match. He played exceptionally well. It was red hot, and he was battling with all of that. And then you had this one kind of moment of a spider was able to completely distract all of what had been an hour and a half of immense focus. It's fascinating. Yeah,
and that's what stood out for me was that in that moment, the respond rather than react was within his control. Yeah. So it's not to be annoyed with him about that, and no excuse for him. But it was just a curiosity just to see that in action with a spider. So yeah, I found that really interesting, and that stood out. I think also that phrase he used around facilitate the path, not push the path. Yeah. And again, I guess others have sort of alluded to that in previous podcasts, but again, I just that realization and that reframing of who we are as parents, how we facilitate that path, and not to push it.
And who we are as parents was a line that he threw kind of glibly out. It was saying, at the end, your kids will reflect you. But it wasn't just, you turn into your dad or you turn into your mum. Your kids will reflect you as they look at you from the court and you're at courtside. So in the middle of an intense moment or in the middle of a game going well or badly, they will look to you and invariably they will embody what you are. They'll mirror you.
Yeah. And again, well, that's quite a scary thought. So even today I was having to consciously tell myself to uncross my arms as I became more and more tense.
Smile and wave.
Yeah. But also I think just that phrase there and that question he said, isn't it, about when they're preparing for their game, about saying to them, what do you want to learn today? And again, it's a really good open question, and again it puts the onus on that sense of learning from the experience and that expectation that they're going to learn. And there's always something that they can develop.
So there's that stuff that he talked about mental toughness, and part of it wasn't this false sense of I'm the man, I'm the girl, but it was that acceptance he talked about awareness and acceptance, being fully present in the moment, and one set up and one set down, accept where I am in the game, and then have patterns of play or routines in your play that keep me focused to get me to the end. I was chatting to a player the other day who often gets nervous when she goes a 3 or 4 love up in a game, because normally she then loses the set, which seems really odd phrase for her to say. She's like, well, hang on, that's a commanding position. But her it's not anxiety, but her excitement of going so well throws her game off. And so it's almost, if you play and she goes 4 up, you've probably got a good chance of winning, which I'm often looking at that and thinking, well, actually, when you're 4 down, your head just drops. But there's something for her that was, whenever I go 4 up, the heart just starts to race, and my imagination thinks I'm nearly there, and then it's robbed from her. So it's that being very aware of where I am in the game, accepting it, but always with my coach or with parents or with someone else, having that match routine that keeps me fully focused. I mean, we took another one of the players with us today to the tournament, and he'd been going on all week about how excited he was to be playing, and it was at a massive place called Sanchez Casal, which is a huge academy out here. And all week, I'm so looking forward, I'm pumped for the weekend, really excited, and we gave him a lift down to it. And the minute he walked into the arena, now the arena is enormous, there are 101 courts there, it is one of the finest kind of looking places to go play tennis, and his shoulders just dropped. The intimidation of literally being there knocked all of the enthusiasm out of him that he'd had all week. Whereas Elijah kind of skipped on and kind of blissfully, that wasn't something that was intimidating for Elijah, but for this other young lad, it seemed to knock the stuffing out of him. When you walk into such a grand arena, I'm imagining, wow, this must be everything you've dreamed of. This must be awesome to play here. But for him, it just not. And again, there's not a lot we could do for him and encourage and stuff. But it's interesting in how sport and the psychological aspects of sport, you know, you arrive at that arena and that's it. You've almost lost because it's just an intimidating and foreboding place to be. And again, it's that being aware I'm here, accepting this makes me nervous, but what am I going to do to push through the nerves?
I think Commoner summed up, isn't it, about, I guess, how different people view that input, isn't it, from sports psychologists. And I think it is, as he termed it, that extra tool to enhance performance. So for me, it is that extra tool that you have in your toolkit as you go on court.
And one practical I'm definitely going to take away was his kind of pre-match kind of thing. Slow it down a little bit. You don't remove the fact that the game's coming, talk about it, but take a little bit of the sting out of it. Slow it down, try and reduce the anxiety levels. Stop maybe as parents us getting pumped up before the big game so that then they become totally wired and then can't give of their all because they've almost burnt themselves out on the journey there with excitement. And it's that kind of help with humour, removing the heat, switching off a little bit, that pre-game routine in the car or the walk down that helps prepare them for it. And sometimes trying to beat the chest isn't what's going to help them when they arrive. So I'm going to kind of take that and think not just about what I do after a game, which is reacting to it, but me being more intentional before a game. What am I bringing that's helpful, that helps you then express yourself?
And that comes back to that respond rather than react.
You are so wise.
Thank
what
you.
An amazing link. Wherever your courtside or pitchside experience takes you over the coming week or so, I do hope that it is a healthy, wholesome and enjoyable time for both you and your kids. Just to say an additional bit with courtside is that starting this month, we're going to start having some courtside minis or courtside light. We haven't quite come up with a proper term yet. We've been getting questions off you through Twitter, and as I bump into parents saying, here's a question I've always wanted to ask a coach. So this month, Joe Ward, who's been on, I think it was episode 3 or 4 with us, is going to do a 10-minute mini courtside question. It's going to be particularly what are her reflections after the US Open final with Serena and Naomi Osaka. What are hers a month or so after she reflects, particularly with her drivers, around equality and participation from females in sport. So, and that's going to happen in between these larger podcasts to try and kind of supplement it. So if you do have questions that you like any of our previous guests for me to drop them a line and to do a 10-minute podcast Q&A on, please do drop them in, or you can follow us on @Courtside Dad. Please do that. And that's an added bit that we want to bring to you. And also, please remember to keep liking us and endorsing us and tweeting away, because it's only through those endorsements that more people get to journey with us through what I think we all agree is an important thing. All the best in these coming weeks, and we will hopefully catch up with you soon.
Bye.